thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on which part of the world are you connecting from. Thank you so much, Alex, for the introduction. Thank you so much for having me, for inviting me to participate on this webinar. For today's topic, I think we have a pretty interesting conversation. The title of this talk is On the Eye of the Beholder, Evidence of Social Sciences to Explain How People Perceive Information in Social Media and News. Before I continue with the webinar, let me just talk a bit about myself. Well, my full name is María Camila Orejarena Ballestas. I'm a psychologist. I work at the Universidad de La Sabana in Colombia. I'm a marketing professor of the International School of Economic and Administrative Sciences. I teach consumer behavior and multisensory product design at undergraduate levels. And the second class is related to the topics of multisensory marketing and experimental psychology. I've had some experience on conducting research and also experience on doing consulting work in a private agency. For today's topic, I'm going to cover this information from different backgrounds. So you're going to hear me speaking about social psychology, behavioral economics, cognitive neuroscience, and even evolutionary psychology. Like I said, we are going to recover a lot of information from different social sciences to really dig into what goes on in our mind when we are processing information. How do we construct meaning from what we're seeing? Why do we share some information and not all of it? And then how do we just interact with everything that we're seeing, how that reflects the way we see the world and even communicate with other people. We are going to land this conversation particularly on digital platforms, especially social media and the news that we can find in social media. Before I go to that topic, I want to begin with a particular framework just to make sure I can anchor the conversation in the particular functioning that our brain has. So imagine this white dot is a person. It could be me, you, your friends, your siblings, etc. But this is us. And now we do not live in a vacuum context, right? We do not live isolated from the rest of the world, be it physical, tangible, or digital. And then the world that we live in looks something like this. So it's pretty massive, looks pretty complex. It has a lot of noise, right? Every point, every line, it is an input that is surrounding us and that we have to process because that's what we do. We process information. However, if this is us and this is how the world surrounding us looks like, that means that we are constantly being bombarded with overflowing information. And some of the main characteristics of the context that we live in is that it has a fast pace. It is quite complex, ever-changing, and uncertain. And the problem with these characteristics of the world is that even though our brain has evolved to know how to work with these characteristics, our brain does not particularly enjoy living in such conditions. If it were up to our brain, a much more pleasurable image would be this one. We have one bright object, pretty easy to process. Yes, it has different colors. Some aspects of the object are shinier than others, but we know what it is. We can see it clearly. It has a lot of contrast with the background, and we can even detect some other shapes in the background. But it's not as messy as this looks. It's less complex, even kind of less erratic and uncertain. The problem is not everything in the world looks like this, right? It resembles and mirrors this image. And the way or the reason why our brain prefers this image than the previous one is because we don't always have as much resources to process a lot of information simultaneously, and information that is pretty complex and erratic. Most of our processes, cognitive processes, are unconscious. Some other are conscious, but this is pretty important for us to think of at the beginning of the session, because it will also explain some concepts that we're going to be discussing in a few minutes. So again, we don't have as much resources to just process everything, think about everything, and in a quite detailed manner. Most of what we do is automatic, it's unconscious, and can even be involuntary. And then some other portion of our cognitive processes are more conscious and controlled and deliberative. But because not everything in the world looks like this image, but rather the previous one, our brain has managed to use particular thinking patterns to be able to deal with the erratic world that we live in, which is dynamic, fast-paced, complex, and uncertain. And the way we deal with all of those problems is to try to predict rather than to react, right? So that we can have more time to just know what to do and how to construct meaning from the input that we are constantly receiving. And also we use shortcuts to decide on what to think, what to interpret, and what to do. How do I behave? And these two are some of the main characteristics of how we process information, of how our brain works. When I talked about heuristics, I meant the shortcuts that we use to just know what to do, what to think, how to behave. And also, like I said, predictive processing. These two are the ones that help us in using the limited resources that we have to deal with all the complexity and dynamic information that is constantly surrounding us. The problem, however, is even though it works and it is able to optimize our resources, it also has some flaws. And the main consequence of having predictive processing and the use of heuristics in the way we think about the world is that it turns our thinking processes biased. Like I said, it's not perfect. It works, but it may have some consequences in particular conditions. This applies not only to the real physical world, but again, to a digital world. And even a world that has so much data, so much information to process, and information that is really easy to access. But particularly, how much information is there online, on the internet? Just using Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Windows, we can have 1,200 petabytes. That means 1.2 million terabytes. Now, think about that. 1 terabyte equals 1,000 gigabytes. So there are thousands and thousands of bits of information, right? How many people in the world are consuming this information? From 7.8 million people across the globe, 3.6 billion are users in social media today. According to Statista, we will have 4.41 billion users by 2025. That means that largely 50% of the world's population is consuming information online. And again, the information that we find on digital platforms has some particularities. Basically, the way that information is disseminated on online platforms is pretty fast, right? It has a really fast speed. It's easy to access and has low cost. This means that just by the click distance, we have infinite possibilities. We have a lot of things to process, a lot of things to know. We have much more information that other generations used to have. That also means that our decisions are now much more complex than they used to be. It's because we have more choices. We have more freedom to choose. And this also means there is quite a challenge to face. Again, we said we don't like uncertainty, we don't like complexity, we avoid erratic information. But as time goes by, the world becomes less organized and less predictive because of how much data we have access to and how fast this data changes. If we go online, yes, we have a lot of information. However, information is not always accurate. It's not always good for people. A study in 2017 estimated that 57% of American adults consult news on social media. However, more than half of the sample in this study said that they did not trust the news that they were reading on social media. So what this says is that, yes, we find for information, we find for the certainty that we need from the world. But even though we find some certainty, it does not work. And why? Because we do not trust that we see, that of what we see. So that misinformation can also become misinformation. It may have some errors, and maybe errors that are meant to be there to deceive people, or information that is presented just to show that some of the large events that are happening on the world are being manipulated by people that have some explicit or implicit political agendas. And the thing is that even though we may not be that conscious of the misinformation, fake news, and conspiracy theories that are out there, they do exist. 47 million accounts on Twitter are bots, and most of them are used to spread political disinformation. Facebook and YouTube are the major vectors for dissemination of conspiracy beliefs and misinformation. They are not the places that origin these beliefs and this misinformation, but they do help in disseminating them at a more fast rate. And the problem with this fact is that even though there are certain organizations looking for fact-checking every possible fake news or misinformation out there, there is a delay of 13 hours approximately between the consumption of the fake news, the misinformation, the conspiracy beliefs, and that of its verification. So yes, we know we have information. Yes, we have some accuracy in the digital world, but we also have misinformation, disinformation, fake news, conspiracy theories, and we don't really know how to face them at a proper speed, at a proper rate. It is a challenge that we're facing today. It can even be an issue of public policy because of how much harm this can do to people. Another problem is that there is much more information, fake news, and conspiracy theories that we believe there is. So we need to start paying attention to it, especially because under some conditions, we can all be susceptible to misinformation, fake news, and conspiracy theories. And that's why this talk is called On the Eye of the Beholder. Facts and truth today are under assault, and perception is everything. We saw from the beginning that we do not like complexity, we do not like uncertainty, we do not like disorganization. And we look constantly for solutions that help us in overcoming these issues, these challenges. But since we are not rational and logical beings, but rather biased beings, we don't always have the particular tools or the particular means to be able to surpass these issues in the most accurate and appropriate way. I'm going to show you now some examples of fake news. You know they are fake news. Probably they can even sound quite strange, but I want you to think on the process that you have inside your head when you read them. So is it that easy for you to just decide it is fake? Or would you need maybe more information just to decide if it's really fake or not? Do you doubt about yourself? So we have this one. Did a black teen request to be tried as a white man? This is a tweet of someone implying that the COVID-19 is a virus that has existed for several years now, and that most nations in the world have been aware of the fact, but just omitted to share it with the rest of the world. Are Black Lives Matter members poisoning fast food? And did Chadwick Boseman die from poison and not for the natural causes of his disease? Especially now, because of how much uncertainty and how much changes have we been facing because of the pandemic, then we have more room to not only create conspiracy beliefs, to disseminate fake news, but also to look for illusory patterns in a moment of our lives when nothing can be predicted, when nothing is certain. And places such as Wired or Alliance for Science from Cornell University have called the coronavirus as a petri dish for conspiracy theories. And I'm pretty sure you've heard a lot of different conspiracy theories, such as saying that the COVID-19 is a bioweapon created by the Chinese government, that it has been caused by the reactions of people with 5G networks, that it has certain effects on some populations, but not others, and so on. There is a lot of things to cover right now, but like I said, since we don't know what to expect, we look for patterns that will guide us into understanding and tell us what to interpret and what to expect. Why does this happen? The question is quite hard to answer. We don't really know exactly what needs to happen for us to fall and just believe in misinformation, fake news, or favor conspiracy beliefs rather than evidence-based knowledge. We do have some ideas, and social sciences give us information to understanding what needs to happen at the individual level or the group and social level for people to believe in misinformation, fake news, and conspiracy theories. We're going to just cover a few of these prospects to better understand why is it that we can all be susceptible to this misinformation, fake news, conspiracy beliefs under some conditions. So to begin with, we're going to check what happens or what needs to happen at the individual level. So first of all, we need to remember that every person is an entire universe. Yes, we can find some patterns across different people in different places of the world that speak different languages, but we cannot standardize the variability of behavior in fixed boxes or fixed conditions, because we all see the world in a particular way. We all have different experiences with the world. We all come from different families. We all have different beliefs and attitudes of the world. And because of that, we see the world accordingly. And remember, most of the information that we process, and better, most of the processing that we do about information is implicit, is automated, is unconscious, uncontrolled, and maybe on some occasions involuntary, which is why we have biased thinking. Now, if we use this biased thinking and we just check what are some of these biases that could explain why some people may be more susceptible to misinformation than others, we could be looking at these as prospects. One, and one that is pretty popular in communication sciences to just understand behavior of consumers, is confirmation bias. And basically, confirmation bias states that we prefer that information that aligns or that is congruent to the way we view the world. That's because we do not like to be confronted, right? We want to believe that what we think about the world is right. Because of that, we tend to believe that other perceptions of the world are not accurate, but rather maybe irrational or biased, which is also why we think about this way about people that have a different set of beliefs than the ones that we have. Like I said, we do not like to be confronted. Normally, when we feel that our judgment is being threatened, we try to argument why the thing that we believe in is correct and why a different set of belief would be wrong. That's called motivated reasoning. And we justify a desired decision, a desired thinking, belief over evidence-based options. And we may even justify in a very irrational way something that we believe in rather than the rationality behind an evidence-based option. And that's bias, again, that's not very logic, but it happens because that's the way that we work. That's the way our brain likes to do things. We've mentioned before that we do not having lack of control, but rather knowing what to expect, knowing what to happen, being prepared, being in control. And the lack of control constantly directs behavior to find patterns elsewhere, which is also why the COVID-19 outbreak has become the petri dish of so many conspiracy beliefs, right? At the beginning of the pandemic, there were a lot more of different theories than we have today, but they are still present because even though we're being used to the idea of the COVID-19 and we are getting to know the virus better, there are still a lot of questions being unanswered. And a particular thing related to the lack of control is that people do not see control the same way. Some people feel they are more in control of their lives than others. And this is a psychological construct called regulatory focus. And basically what it says is that we tend to see the world in two different ways. In one way, we tend to achieve gains and we are motivated to look for that elsewhere. And because of it, we feel like everything that happens to us depends on what we do. It is dependent of our own actions and not just random events or luck or destiny. But when we do not feel in control of everything that happens to us of our life, then we are not motivated to achieve more with what we have, but rather to avoid any loss, right? Because if I lose something, maybe it's not entirely because of my doing, but just because something that had to happen. So I need to protect myself more against any adversity. All of these concepts, all of these biases are associated to a particular term that you may be familiar with, which is called cognitive dissonance. And basically, cognitive dissonance states that, yes, we have a certain way to think about ourselves, to think about the world. And when we are confronted with something that is opposing that way to think about ourselves or the world, we feel or we have a sense of discomfort. And we do not like that discomfort. That's why we tend to eliminate that discomfort and still remain thinking about the world and ourselves the way we used to be. The solution of the cognitive dissonance is also why it explains that sometimes we justify decisions and the decisions that we desire rather than just opting for the more accurate, logical, and evidence-based option, right? And that's because we are constantly looking and longing for consistency. And that consistency is shaping the way we evaluate information, how we interpret information, and how we behave, be it in the physical material world or in a digital world. Let's look now at what needs to happen at the group or the social level. And for this, we're going to understand what social identity means. The theory of social identity states that, yes, every person in the world has a definition of who they are because of what they like, right? Their preferences, their experiences. But they are defining themselves not only because of who they are as individuals, but who they are in specific social groups. Myself, yes, I am Camila, but I'm also a sister. I am a colleague. I am a professor. I am a woman. I am Colombian. And the thing with social identities is that they are salient in some other contexts than others. So even though my definition as individual is Camila Orejarena, I have also other identities that may be more salient than others depending on the context. We know who we are, what we like, not only because of experience, but also because of how the different social groups and the relationships we have with others have molded us into becoming, right? So because of social identity, we interpret information and we process everything that we see in the world in specific ways. This shaping of the social identity is also going to shape things such as political attitudes, judgments, our own behaviors, and others' behaviors. And since most social groups are composed of people and by people who think the same or have some similarities, we normally tend to have user groups in social media composed of like-minded people. And the information that they share, the information that they read, tends to be polarized. Why? Because they are used to think the same about the world. They all share the same pattern for interpreting information. And this is generating what's called the echo chamber effect, which is a group of people, a very closed group of people that is segmented and homogeneous and has also limited information access. Why? Because they are used to processing and just interpreting information the same way. We are social beings. We have social identities, we have individual identities, but because of our social because of our social nature, we tend to prefer social acceptance and affirmation. We all face social risks. Some people are less likely to risk who they are in their social groups, and some people just feel more safe in committing certain risks. But we cannot deny that we all long for the social acceptance and affirmation. And because of this, most of the information that we share online and most of the patterns that we follow to interpret information depend also on the way that our social group does it. For instance, we may have a particular opinion about, just to put the example, whether or not to use masks, right, when you're outdoors or indoors, if you want to follow social distance. Is it really needed to use hand sanitizer? Do you really need to wash your hands so many times during the day and for so long? And we may have certain different sets of beliefs, not only towards the COVID-19 and the norms and regulations to follow, but also maybe climate change, gun control, same-sex marriage, whether to attend campus for like traditional classes, or do you want to keep your classes completely remote? We may have our own set of beliefs towards that matter. But because of who we are in a social group, we may tend to prefer another different set of opinions. And why? Because of social credibility. Yes, we may tend to favor our own line of thinking, but we also hear others. And when others are aligned in the same position, then maybe we tend to question what we think of the world and how we see different events. And when some other people think of a particular topic or a particular source to be more credible, then we tend to favor that line of thinking. And another thing to think about is the heuristic of frequency, which is the more we hear about something, the more credible it seems to be. If we were constantly being bombarded by fake news, conspiracy beliefs, and misinformation, then we are more likely to favor that that information rather than scientific information or science or information that comes from evidence-based source, which is also why so many fact-checking sources ask people to avoid just reading at conspiracy beliefs and fake news, but rather nurture their knowledge from evidence-based sources and official sources of information. Oh, sorry. I want to show you now a very interesting example of a study that is trying to understand how is social identity, the social normatives that we have in groups affecting the way we interpret information and also the way that we share information. So basically what they did was look at different tweets being retweeted in particular social groups. They began looking at tweets in 3 different topics. So they had gun control, same-sex marriage, and climate change. And they wanted to discover what is it that makes a tweet become more disseminated and retweeted than others. And what they found was that when the tweet included moral, emotional language, such as saying that having the word of punishment, war, fear, peace, and so on, it increased the chances of the tweet being retweeted by 20%. It did not matter the content of the topic, even if the topics were highly moral and had moral content. Just having those words increased the dissemination rate of the tweet. However, the way that the tweet was disseminated was very particular. And why? Because retweeting the information was fixated to the group boundaries. So what you have here is the way that liberals and then conservatives retweeted the information, whether from gun control issues, same-sex marriage topics, or climate change. Every dot here is a user, which is just posting some information. And then every line or edge is the sharing of a tweet. Most of the dots are in complete different poles. And then we see some edges. That's the magic of the graph, is just to see that even though the same content was being shared, most of the dissemination occurred within the boundaries of the group. So what this is showing us is exactly what we mentioned about the echo chamber effect and how user groups are polarized, segmented, and homogeneous communities, because that's the way that we behave. That's the way that we function in the world. We've seen a lot of different issues regarding the matter, right? We've mentioned the risk of just interacting with misinformation, fake news, conspiracy beliefs. But the second question after understanding why can we all be susceptible under some conditions is what can we do now, and what path should we follow? Where do we go from now? Most traditional or maybe intuitive solutions would be to just do some fact checking and debunk all the lies that we may find online. However, recent evidence suggests that it does not work, at least not in all cases. So we may have some other solutions to follow. The first four are regarding maybe the solutions that we may do as individuals for our own life, and then the next set of steps are maybe regarding those who share information, who publish information online. So newspapers, official organizations, websites, and maybe groups that are dedicated to do that debunking and corrections of misinformation, fake news, and conspiracy beliefs. So the first one is just to embrace complexity. Yes, we do not like that. We struggle facing complexity, facing uncertainty, but it's just the way that the world works. So we need to become more resilient. We need to just accept the fact that we don't always have everything under control. The second one is to recognize that we have biased thinking. We do not have all answers. We do not possess the absolute truth. And we need to become more comfortable by being uncomfortable. We need to become more open-minded to hear others, to read different information that can be opposing what we believe in. We need to better understand what is under our control and what isn't, just to make sure that we can be comfortable in that lack of certainty and in that lack of control. And also consider what we understand on a matter. Like I said, we do not possess all truth. We don't have all the answers all the time. And if we are biased, if we may be ignorant in some topics, others are as well. So we just need to be more friendly with each other and more understanding with each other. Now, and this goes, like I said, for organizations or those publishing and just sharing information online, maybe even not only online, but using broadcasts, platforms, and so on. If debunking or correcting false information does not always work, we may have different paths or solutions to follow. For instance, nudging the consideration of accuracy. When we speak of the term nudge, we refer to modifying something in the environment to help people perceive and stimulate the input of information that we're sharing in a different way. And this is done like in a very subtle and implicit way. What some evidence says is that these nudges can be done just by randomly selecting posts and asking users to rate how accurate the post is, and thinking about very implicitly the source of the information and the credibility of the source, maybe the facts that are being delivered in the post, and so on. And just using this helps users be more aware of the type of information they are consuming, and even think before they share. Am I helping anyone with the information that I'm sharing? Can I inform others with this information? Am I generating panic? Am I generating doubt? And so on. We also need to be aware, like I said at the beginning, we are all very different universes. And because of that, credibility in sources is not perceived the same way. Therefore, we can diversify how many credible sources we have for the different audiences that exist in social media and that exist in the world, just to make sure that we can guarantee more options to share accurate information. And then another and very interesting one is called psychological inoculation. And this resembles the metaphor of inoculation in medical field. So basically what it says is that if exposing people to understand how false the information that they believe in is does not work, then maybe we just can begin with more weak and subtle expositions of such correction. So what you do is you expose users to, like I said, weak expositions of false information, so that the response that they generate is not strong enough to just decide that they do not believe in the debunking, but just to generate some questions. And when you do this constantly, then you prepare users to have maybe better resources and tools to just face fake news, conspiracy beliefs, and misinformation. So you are not exposing users in a very strong manner to make them feel overwhelmed with what's going on, but you are triggering very weak responses from them. And now the last one, and this is very particular for the pandemic and what's going on with the COVID-19 virus. So what we need to do to inform people of what do they need to do at home, how can they protect themselves, to share the promotion of these healthy related behaviors. We can emphasize on the benefits rather on the consequences and health related negative consequences of what will happen if they do not do these behaviors, and have information and the communication of information that is focused on protecting other people rather than ourselves. The information that we share can be aligned to the moral values of the audience, of the recipient. We can highlight social group approval, but also appeal to evidence-based sources and the science behind the information, and also social consensus. The best way to promote behaviors is not only doing one of these options, but doing them at the same time. So you follow all of the recommendations, and that way you can communicate the main idea, understanding that all people will interpret information probably in a different way. This is a really cool example of an inoculation intervention. It's called Bad News. It's a game that you can play online, and you can just type down Bad News game, and you'll find the web page, the link. And this is an example of inoculation because what the game consists on is showing people what a troll, a cyborg, or a bot is doing when they are disseminating fake news or conspiracy beliefs. So when you understand the techniques and the procedure to follow, you may be more aware and accurate to call out fake news, misinformation, and conspiracy beliefs. And that's what inoculation and psychological inoculation is. That was all for this session. Thank you so much for everyone joining us. I hope this was interesting, insightful, and I'll proceed to answer any questions that there may be.
Thank you very much, Maria. That was really interesting. Particularly like the part regarding bias. It's always find that quite interesting in terms of people's biased views and how they're shared, especially in terms of that graph in terms of the retweets as well. Quite fascinating work, really. So thank you for coming along today and sharing that. That was really insightful, and I think it gives everyone a lot to think of when they, depending on what they read and challenging sources and things like that, because it's very important. Has anybody got any questions they would like to ask Maria? You can either raise your hand and ask your question verbally, or if you don't want to be including put your question in the chat box and we will relay your question to Maria.
Also, let me know if it feels right for you. If you want to just type down the question in Spanish, I can translate it to English and then respond it in English.
That's great. So we've got a question from one of my colleagues, Richard.
Mm-hmm.
Richard, you've got your hand up. Do you want to just ask your question?
Hi, Maria. Thank you for that. Thank you for the webinar, Maria. That was really fascinating. I'm interested to know where you think the future direction of social media will go. You know, now we're kind of spending a lot more time online. Do you think it'll actually get worse, or will there be a cut-off point before things get better?
That's a really good question. A difficult one for me as well. I actually don't know. I'm aware some countries are starting to consider some regulations for news being and just information being disseminated in social media. So I guess that would be a very important aspect to consider, and that could help in just understanding what will happen in terms of the information that is being shared online, and also how people interpret that information. But more than that, I'd say it's more a matter of maybe even just public policy and having more people interested and aware of the issue that we're facing, so that we can work on better solutions to make people be aware that most of the information that they see online is not true, and then how to call out information as being truth or maybe just lie. And I think that would work. I'm not really sure on what to expect and what's going to happen with social media, especially because recent events just showed us that we have no idea of the future, that everything is uncertain. But I think those two aspects could help us maybe have better insights on what's going to happen next.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you. That's a good question, Richard. Maria, I have a question. Do you feel that, I mean, it's difficult to say for all social media providers, but do you feel they're doing enough in terms of policing and protecting individuals from fake news and trolls, for example?
Could you repeat it again, please?
Oh, sorry, I just said, do you feel that social media providers, do you feel they're doing enough to be policing their websites and protecting individuals from fake news or people that are acting as trolls, so to speak?
No, definitely not at all. The problem is that even if social media had certain algorithms to just detect trolls, bots, cybers, and so many people disseminating false information, the way that the information, the fake news, and all of these maybe deceived sources are created, they try to mirror and resemble natural and human information. So it's really hard to detect and know when someone's sharing fake news and so on. But I think we still need a lot more to do to just face the problem.
No, thank you very much. I think if people are aware and using that step process that you've provided at the end of your presentation, then people will be in a lot better position to challenge what they're reading and understand what they're saying before they hit retweet. That would be quite nice. Is there any other questions? Has anybody got any other points or questions they'd like to No? Okay. Well, as thank you for everybody attending today, and many thanks once again to Maria for taking your time to deliver today's session. We will be posting the recording of this session on our Open Moodle page, so I believe everybody that's joined us in our session today has access to this. So if you want to go back and have a look at any of the notes or refresh yourself from any of the themes, please feel free to use our Open Moodle page to do so. And yeah, once again, many thank you for joining us today for today's Global Connections webinar, and we hope to see you in some of our webinars this week, as we have one on Wednesday, one on Thursday, one on Friday, and you're all welcome to. Thank you very much and goodbye. Oh, hang on 1 second, sorry.